Take it. You can have mine. Annie said it quietly as she stepped toward him. The boy jerked his head up in surprise. The lunch tray in his hands stalled in midair, tilting just enough that a pea rolled toward the edge and stopped. "What?" he whispered. Annie didn't answer right away. She set her own tray down in front of him and nudged it closer with both hands. She didn't rush. She didn't look around to see who was watching. She had already made the decision. "You can eat this," she said. "All of it." The boy shook his head fast, almost panicked. He pushed the tray back toward her, the plastic scraping softly against the table. "No, I can't. You'll need it." "I don't," Annie said. "Yes, you do." His voice cracked. "You should keep it." Annie met his eyes. They were the kind of eyes that had learned to count things too early. Bites, days, leftovers. She leaned in a little, lowering her voice. "It's okay," she said. "Really." He glanced down at his own tray. Half of it was already gone, the rest carefully arranged so it would fit into the thin plastic bag hidden inside his jacket. He noticed Annie looking and quickly zipped the jacket a little higher. "It's for my grandma," he said, defensive now. "She didn't eat yesterday." Annie nodded once. "She's sick." He frowned. "How do you know that?" "You always take food home," Annie said. "And you always pretend you're not hungry." He didn't answer. That was answer enough. The boy pushed her tray back again, harder this time. "I can't take yours," he said. "That's not fair." Annie picked up the tray and slid it back toward him for the third time. Her hands were small but firm. "I want you to." He stared at the food like it might disappear if he looked at it too long. "You'll get in trouble." "I won't," Annie said. "They don't watch me." That part slipped out before she thought about it. She didn't yet understand why it was true, only that it was. He swallowed. His stomach made a low sound, loud enough that Annie heard it. His ears turned red. Annie leaned closer. "Listen," she whispered. "I'm the daughter of a billionaire. I won't be hungry." The word billionaire landed between them, heavy and strange. The boy looked at her shoes, her sweater, her careful braids. He looked back at her face. "You don't look rich," he said. Annie shrugged. "I am." He hesitated, then shook his head again, slower this time. "I don't want to take from you." "You're not," Annie said. "You're helping me." That confused him. "How?" She thought for a moment. "If you eat, your grandma eats. And then, you won't be sad." She paused. "And if you're not sad, then I'm not sad." That did it. He pulled the tray toward himself. His hands trembled as he broke the roll in half, wrapping part of it carefully in the plastic bag. He ate the rest quickly, eyes down, chewing too fast, like the food might be taken away if he slowed. Annie sat back with nothing in front of her. She folded her hands in her lap and waited for the bell. Her stomach already ached, but she told herself it didn't matter. She had said she wouldn't be hungry. She meant it. When the bell rang, she stood and carried her empty tray to the return window. It made a hollow sound as she slid it onto the stack. No one noticed. No one ever did. That night, the house smelled warm and familiar. Her father was already home, his jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up as he stirred a pot on the stove. He glanced at her as she came in, his expression softening in that way it always did when he saw her. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Wash up. Dinner's ready." Annie washed her hands and sat down. When the plate was placed in front of her, she didn't wait. She ate fast, faster than usual, barely tasting the food. Her father watched her for a moment, his eyes narrowing just slightly. "Slow down," he said gently. "You're not in a race." "I'm hungry," Annie said, and kept eating. She finished everything on her plate and reached for another roll. As she lifted it, she glanced at him, then slipped it into the pocket of her sweater when she thought he wasn't looking. He was. His spoon paused midair. Just for a second, a small frown creased his forehead before he smoothed it away. Later, as he cleared the table, Annie lingered near the counter. She reached for an apple, then another. Turning her body so he couldn't see clearly, she tucked them into her backpack, zipping it carefully. That frown came back. "Annie," he said, not accusing, just curious.
Hey, sweetie.
"Did you eat lunch today?"
Maybe slow
"Yes,"
down just a
she
little
said
bit.
quickly. He studied her face.
Tummy ache.
She didn't look away. "Okay,"
Hey,
he
sweetie.
said at last. That night, he tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead. She curled onto her side, one hand clenched around the apple hidden under her pillow. When he turned off the light, he paused at the door and looked back at her. She looked smaller somehow, thinner. He told himself he was imagining it. The next day, she did it again. And the next. Annie learned how to be careful, how to hide food without being seen, how to eat just enough at night so her father wouldn't ask too many questions, how to smile and say I'm fine and mean something else entirely. Her father noticed the changes piling up like small, undeniable facts. The faster eating, the food disappearing, the way she avoided his eyes when he mentioned school. Each thing alone meant nothing. Together, they made his jaw tighten. On Friday, as she slipped a roll into her pocket and headed for her room, he watched her go. That same quiet frown settling in deeper this time. Something was wrong. He didn't know what it was yet, but for the first time since he'd become a father, the man who could solve almost any problem with money or influence felt the unease of not knowing how to protect the one thing that mattered most. And downstairs, in her room, Annie counted apples and told herself she could make it one more day without lunch. She always did. By Monday morning, Annie's routine had become precise. She woke before her alarm, slipped out of bed quietly, and dressed without turning on the overhead light. In the kitchen, she drank a glass of milk standing up, eyes on the clock, careful not to touch the bowl of fruit on the counter. She had learned that taking too much too early led to questions. Questions led to worry. Worry led to rules, and rules would stop everything. Her father noticed the early mornings, even if he didn't say anything. He noticed most things. It was a habit that had followed him from boardrooms to living rooms, from billion-dollar negotiations to the quiet, ordinary spaces he still hadn't fully learned how to inhabit. At 40, he lived a life built on control. Control of numbers, control of outcomes, control of risk. The house reflected it: clean lines, neutral colors, nothing unnecessary. Annie was the only thing in it that hadn't been optimized. He hadn't planned on becoming a father. Annie had entered his life 6 years earlier, wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, her cries small but determined. He'd been there for paperwork, not miracles. He'd told himself he was doing the responsible thing. He had resources. He had stability. He could give a child a chance. What he hadn't expected was the way she would rearrange everything. He had chosen a public elementary school deliberately. Not for appearances, not for praise, but because he believed something deeply and stubbornly. Children learned character where the world didn't bend for them. Private schools felt like insulation. He wanted Annie to know real people, real lives, not just polished versions of both. Every morning, he drove her to school himself. "You've got your jacket?" he asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Yes, lunch is provided today." Where'd you fit?" "I know. You sure?" Annie nodded, eyes fixed on the window. He frowned, just slightly. It was nothing. Kids went quiet sometimes. He told himself that as he pulled up to the drop-off lane and watched her climb out of the car, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Have a good day," he called. She turned and smiled, quick and practiced. "I will." The car door closed. The smile disappeared. At lunch, Annie moved automatically. Tray, food, table. The boy was already there. He didn't argue anymore. When she slid her tray toward him, he hesitated, then accepted it without meeting her eyes. They had stopped talking about it. Talking made it harder. By Wednesday, Annie's stomach hurt all the time. Not enough to cry. Not enough to stop her. Just enough to remind her that she was doing something important. At home, her father began to see patterns he didn't like. She ate fast. She asked for seconds more often. Once, he found an apple core wrapped in a napkin at the bottom of her backpack. When he held it up, she shrugged. "I forgot it," she said. He let it go, but he started watching. He noticed the way she avoided eye contact when he mentioned school, the way she grew quiet when he asked about lunch, the way she flinched slightly when he opened the pantry, like she was calculating something he couldn't see. One evening, as he worked at the kitchen island with his laptop open, Annie padded in wearing her socks, carrying a slice of bread. "Can I have this for later?" she asked. "For when?" she thought. In case of what?" She shrugged. "In case I get hungry." He studied her face. "You can always ask." "I know," she said quickly. He nodded. but the answer didn't settle right. That night, after she went to bed, he stood alone in the kitchen, longer than necessary. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually calmed him. Tonight, it didn't. He opened the refrigerator. Everything was there. Food wasn't the problem, so why did his daughter act like it was? On Thursday, he checked the school's lunch account online. The balance was untouched. No transactions, no errors. He stared at the screen, then refreshed it. Still nothing. That didn't make sense. On Friday morning, Annie came down the stairs slower than usual. She paused halfway, one hand gripping the railing. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said, but her voice lacked its usual certainty. He knelt to her level. "You look tired." She smiled again, that same careful smile. "I'm fine." He watched her walk away and felt something tighten in his chest. At lunch that day, Annie almost changed her mind. The boy's grandmother had been coughing more. He had said it quietly, eyes down, fingers twisting the plastic bag. Annie's tray felt heavier than usual as she slid it toward him. "You don't have to," he said. Finally, "Yes, I do," she replied. He took it. That evening, her father came home early. He found Annie in her room, sitting on the floor, lining up apples beside her bed. 1, 2, 3. She froze when she saw him. "What's this?" he asked gently. Her shoulders tensed. "Nothing." He picked one up, turning it over in his hand. "You don't need to hide food." I'm not hiding," she said, too fast. "Annie." She looked down. He sat beside her, not touching the apples. "Did something happen at school?" "No." "Are you eating lunch?" "Yes." The word came out automatically. Too quickly. He knew that tone. He used it himself, when he didn't want to be questioned. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Okay." He didn't push. Not yet. That night, he lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. Numbers and projections didn't come. Instead, images did. Annie eating too fast. Annie hiding food. Annie saying she was fine. He thought of something his own father had once said, long before money changed everything. Pay attention to what children do when they think no one's looking. The next Monday, instead of driving straight to his office after drop-off, he parked across the street from the school. He told himself he was just curious. He told himself it was nothing. But when the lunch bell rang and he saw his daughter step into the cafeteria with that same careful posture, that same practiced calm, he stayed where he was, watching, waiting, and for the first time since Annie had come into his life, he felt the quiet certainty that something precious was slipping through his fingers. Not because he lacked the means to stop it, but because he had never imagined he would need to. If this story moved you even a little, take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments wherever you are watching, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that speak to the quiet truths we often miss. From his car, the school looked harmless. Brick walls, a small playground, flags lifting lazily in the morning air. Parents came and went without stopping, trusting the building to do what buildings like this were supposed to do. Teach, protect, feed. He had trusted it too. He stayed in the car longer than he meant to, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the entrance. He told himself he was overreacting, that this was what happened when successful men tried to solve emotional problems the same way they solved logistical ones by hovering too close. Still, he didn't leave. At noon, he walked inside. No announcement. No badge that said who he was. Just another adult moving through the hallways that smelled faintly of cleaner and crayons. He nodded politely at a teacher who smiled without recognition. That suited him fine. He stopped where the hallway opened toward the cafeteria. He didn't step in. From where he stood, he could see the movement. Children filing through the line. Trays being passed. The rhythm of it all. Efficient. Predictable. And then he saw Annie. She moved differently than the others. Not slower, exactly. More careful. Like someone who had learned to keep space around herself. She took her tray, walked straight to the same table, and sat. He waited. Across from her, the boy arrived a moment later. He didn't smile. He didn't look around. He set his tray down and immediately reached into his jacket, pulling out the familiar plastic bag. His stomach tightened. He watched Annie hesitate. For a split second, just long enough that most people would have missed it, she looked down at her tray. At the food. At the apple resting near the edge. Then she did what she had been doing for days. She slid the tray forward. He couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. He saw the boy shake his head, saw him push the tray back, saw Annie lean forward, her mouth moving, her hand steady as she pushed it back again. Finally, the boy stopped resisting. The billionaire stood frozen in the hallway while his daughter gave away her lunch. Something inside him shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder, sharper, understanding. He saw the boy break the roll in half, wrap part of it carefully, and eat the rest too fast. He saw Annie sit back with nothing in front of her, hands folded, eyes down. He saw her wait through the entire lunch period without touching a single bite. No one intervened. No one noticed. When the bell rang, Annie stood, returned her empty tray, and walked away. He stepped back into the hallway before she could see him. In the car later, his hands shook. He had built companies from nothing. He had negotiated deals that had made grown men sweat. He had dismantled competitors without raising his voice. None of that had prepared him for the sight of his 6-year-old daughter choosing hunger with the certainty of someone who believed it was her responsibility. That evening, he didn't mention lunch. He watched. He watched her eat quickly again, watched her eyes flick toward the counter when she thought he wasn't paying attention. He watched her tuck a napkin-wrapped piece of bread into her sleeve with the clumsy confidence of a child who believed she was being clever. This time, he didn't pretend not to see. "Annie," he said softly. She froze. "What's that?" She looked down at her arm, then back up at him. For the first time, she didn't answer right away. "It's just in case," she said. "In case of what?" She swallowed. "In case someone else needs it." The words hit him harder than any accusation could have. He crouched in front of her, bringing himself to her height. "Why would someone else need your food?" She looked past him, at the wall, at the floor, anywhere but his face. "Because they don't have enough." "And you do?" She nodded. "You always say we have more than we need." He closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had said that. He had said it proudly, said it as a lesson, said it without imagining how literally she might take it. "That doesn't mean you should go hungry," he said carefully. She frowned. "But if I don't, they will." Eris. There it was. The logic of a child. Clean, brutal, uncompromising. He stood up slowly. "Go. Get ready for bed." She hesitated. "Are you mad?" "No," he said. And that was true. "I'm thinking." That night, sleep didn't come easily. He lay awake replaying the scene in the cafeteria. The way Annie had moved, the certainty in her actions. He thought about the boy, the plastic bag, the careful saving of food. He thought about systems. He had always believed systems failed because people ignored data, because they refused to see patterns. But what if the pattern was there, obvious and ugly, and everyone simply chose not to look? In the quiet of the night, another thought surfaced, one that made his chest ache. Annie hadn't told him because she didn't think she needed to. She believed this was her job. The next morning, he made a decision. He wouldn't confront the school. Not yet. He wouldn't make calls or demand explanations. He wouldn't scare Annie into stopping without understanding why. He would learn. At drop-off, he kissed her forehead a little longer than usual. "Be good today." She smiled. "I always am." He waited until her backpack disappeared through the doors. Then he sat in the car, staring at the building, and realized something that unsettled him more than anything else so far. For the first time in his life, he didn't know how to fix a problem with money, and that meant he would have to fix it another way. Slowly, carefully, the way Annie had been doing all along. By Tuesday, the billionaire had become someone else, not in the way the world would notice. He still wore the same tailored coats, still answered emails with ruthless efficiency, still spoke calmly to executives who mistook composure for comfort. But beneath that surface, something had shifted. A vigilance had taken root, quiet and unyielding. He adjusted his schedule without announcing it to anyone. Meetings moved, calls shortened, lunches canceled. For the first time in years, he left large blocks of time deliberately empty. Time, he had learned, was the only currency Annie had ever asked for. That morning, after dropping her off, he didn't drive away. He parked down the street again, engine off, hands folded in his lap. From here, he could see the side entrance teachers used, the small windows near the cafeteria, the worn path students followed without thinking. He waited. Waiting had never been his strength. He preferred action, decisions, outcomes. But this required restraint. If he moved too fast, Annie would shut down. If he reacted like a billionaire instead of a father, he would lose the truth before he ever touched it. At lunchtime, he didn't go inside. Instead, he watched faces. He watched children leave the cafeteria afterward. Most of them moved quickly, careless, already thinking about recess. But a few walked slower. Some looked tired. Some looked alert in the way hunger makes you alert. Annie came out last. She walked beside the boy. Their steps matched. He was talking. She was listening. She nodded once, then reached into her backpack and handed him something small. He slipped it into his pocket without looking. The billionaire's jaw tightened. That evening, he tried again, not with questions, with space. Dinner was quieter than usual. Annie ate quickly but not as desperately as the night before. When she finished, she lingered at the table, swinging her legs slightly, watching him with cautious curiosity. "You don't have to rush tonight," he said. She hesitated. "Okay." They sat in silence for a moment. He poured himself a glass of water, giving her time to decide whether she would speak. "Daddy?" she asked finally. "Yes? Do you remember when you said being rich means we should help people?" He set the glass down carefully. "I remember. And that we shouldn't waste food. Aid?" "Yes." She nodded, as if checking off a list. "I'm doing that." He leaned back in his chair. "I know you think you are." Her brow furrowed. "Aren't I?" He chose his words slowly. "Helping people shouldn't hurt you." She looked at him then. Really looked. "But sometimes it does." The simplicity of the statement stole his breath. "Who taught you that?" he asked. She shrugged. "Life." He smiled faintly. "You're 6. She shrugged again. Still, that night, he didn't sleep. He replayed her words over and over, turning them the way he turned problems in his mind until they revealed their weak points. Helping people shouldn't hurt you, but sometimes it does. The truth was, he had built his entire life on a version of that idea. Sacrifice now, pay later, bleed privately, so the structure could stand. He had just never meant for Annie to inherit it so young. On Wednesday morning, he called his assistant and cleared the rest of the week. Then he called a private investigator he trusted not to dig up dirt, not to threaten or expose, but to observe. "I want to know what happens during lunch," he said simply. "No interference, no contact, just eyes." The investigator paused. "Your daughter?" "Yes." "Anything specific I should be looking for?" "Yes," he said quietly. "Who goes hungry?" That afternoon, Annie's teacher emailed him. Nothing alarming, just a routine message about class participation. But one sentence lingered. "Annie has been very quiet lately." He stared at the screen longer than necessary. Quiet was not a personality trait. It was a signal. By Thursday, the investigator confirmed what he already knew. "It's not just one kid," the man said over the phone. "There are a few. Mostly kids who don't draw attention. They've learned how not to. And Annie? She's feeding one of them regularly. Sometimes more." The billionaire closed his eyes. That night, he watched Annie pack her backpack. She moved carefully, glancing toward the hallway before slipping an apple and a roll inside. He didn't stop her. Not yet. Instead, he said, "Annie." She stiffened. "Yes? Tomorrow," he said. "I'm going to walk you to the door." She looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Because I want to." She studied his face, searching for danger. "Okay." The next day, he held her hand longer than usual at the school entrance. "Remember," he said, crouching slightly, "you can tell me anything." She nodded. "I know." But her eyes said something else. They said she didn't believe him. That afternoon, he sat alone in his office, staring at a photo on his desk. Annie, younger, laughing, crumbs on her face. He had taken it during their first year together, a year when he believed love was enough. Now he understood something he had missed. Love without attention is just another form of neglect. And neglect, no matter how unintentional, always has a cost. At 6 o'clock, he stood by the window and watched the city darken. Somewhere in that sprawl, children were counting bites. Grandmothers were skipping meals, and his daughter was learning lessons he had never meant to teach. He made another decision then. Not a loud one. Not one that would make headlines, but one that would change everything. Tomorrow, he would stop watching from a distance. Tomorrow, he would step closer, and whatever he found there, he would not look away. On Friday morning, the billionaire did something he had never done before. He took the long way. Instead of pulling into the drop-off lane and watching Annie disappear into the building, he parked, got out of the car, and walked with her across the cracked sidewalk toward the school doors. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, not guiding, not pushing, just there. Annie noticed immediately. "You don't usually walk me," she said. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to today." Well. She glanced up at him, measuring his tone. "Am I in trouble?" "No," she nodded, but her body stayed tense. Children sensed shifts before adults admitted them. At the doors, he knelt so they were eye level. "I'll be here when school's over," he said. "Right on time." "You always are," Annie said. This time, when she turned away, he watched her until the doors closed behind her. Then he didn't leave. He stayed, not inside, not interfering, just close enough to feel the rhythm of the place. Teachers arriving, custodians pushing carts, parents who lingered, reluctant to go back to whatever waited for them beyond the fence. At lunch, he went inside. No announcement, no demand to see administrators. He wore a plain coat, no watch, nothing that signaled who he was. To anyone who noticed him at all, he looked like a volunteer, maybe a substitute, maybe a father with time on his hands. He stood near the back wall. The cafeteria unfolded the same way it always did. Lines formed, trays slid, noise rose and fell in waves. Then Annie appeared. He felt it in his chest before he saw it. The familiar carefulness, the way she held her tray with two hands, as if it mattered more than it should. She sat at the same table. The boy arrived moments later. The billionaire forced himself to breathe slowly. He watched the exchange unfold with painful clarity. Annie sliding the tray forward. The boy refusing. Annie insisting. Not dramatic. Not whispered urgently. Just patient, relentless kindness. When the boy finally accepted, Annie leaned back, hands folded, eyes on the table. She did not eat. No adult intervened. No rule was broken. No alarm was triggered. The system worked exactly as designed. He stayed until the bell rang. Until Annie stood. Until she returned an empty tray and walked away with a straight back and an empty stomach. Only then did he leave. That afternoon, he picked her up himself. "How was school?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. "Fine," Annie said. He nodded. "Did anything special happen?" She hesitated for half a second. "No." At home, she went straight to her room. He watched from the hallway as she opened her backpack and checked its contents. An apple, a roll, a small carton of milk she had somehow acquired and wrapped in a napkin. She exhaled, relieved. That night, he cooked, not for efficiency, not because it was expected, but because he needed to do something with his hands that didn't involve fixing, confronting, or breaking. Annie ate fast again. Halfway through the meal, she slowed, looked at him. "You're watching me." "Yes," he said. "Why?" "Because I should have been doing it all along." She frowned. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know." She relaxed slightly. "Then why do you look sad?" He considered lying. Considered telling her he was tired, busy, anything simpler than the truth. "Because I didn't see something important," he said instead. "And you had to carry it by yourself." She stared at her plate. "I didn't mind." "I know," he said softly. "That's the problem." After dinner, she reached for another roll and hesitated. Her eyes flicked to his face, searching. "You can take it," he said. "You don't have to hide." She slipped it into her pocket anyway. Habit was stronger than permission. That night, after she fell asleep, he sat at his desk and opened a file he hadn't touched in years. Not a financial document, not a contract. Notes. He began writing down what he had seen. Dates, times, patterns, children who lingered after lunch, trays returned too light, the absence of adult attention. He wasn't building a case yet. He was building understanding. Saturday morning, he took Annie grocery shopping. This alone was unusual. He normally ordered everything, but today, he wanted her to see abundance up close, to feel it without pressure. She walked beside him through the aisles, touching fruit, reading labels she didn't fully understand. When they reached the bread section, she stopped. "Can we get this one?" she asked, pointing to a plain loaf. "Why that one?" She shrugged. "It's easy to share." He swallowed. "Yes," he said. "We can." At checkout, she watched the conveyor belt, counting items under her breath. When the total appeared, she looked up at him. "That's a lot," she said. "It's okay," he replied. "We can afford it." She nodded, satisfied, as if that settled something important. That afternoon, he drove her to the park. They sat on a bench while she ate an apple, juice running down her chin. He wiped it gently with a napkin. "You don't always have to be the one who gives," he said. She thought about that. "Someone has to." "Yes," he agreed. "But it doesn't always have to be you." He see well do nine. She leaned against him, quiet. That night, he made another call. Not to lawyers, not to administrators, to his investigator. "I need more," he said. "Not proof." "It already is," the man replied. "That's the problem." On Sunday evening, Annie packed her backpack again. This time, he sat on the bed beside her. "You don't have to take food tomorrow," he said gently. She paused. "What if he's hungry? What if you are?" She didn't answer. He reached for her hand. "I'm not asking you to stop caring," he said. "I'm asking you to let me help you carry it." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said. But her voice wasn't convinced. Monday would come, and with it, the test of whether care could survive without sacrifice. The billionaire turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching his daughter sleep. He knew now that watching was no longer enough. Soon, he would have to act, quietly, carefully, the way the most dangerous truths always demanded. Monday returned with the quiet inevitability of a tide. Annie woke before the alarm again, but this time she lay still, staring at the ceiling. Her backpack sat by the door, already packed. She knew exactly what was inside it. She also knew what her father had asked of her. Don't carry it alone. She swung her legs off the bed and padded down the hallway. In the kitchen, her father stood at the counter, coffee untouched, reading something on his phone that he wasn't really seeing. He looked up when he heard her. "Morning," he said. "Morning." She poured herself a glass of milk and drank it slowly, watching him over the rim. He didn't comment. He didn't rush her. That, more than anything, made her uneasy. In the car, the radio played softly. Annie stared out the window, fingers tracing invisible shapes on the glass. "Halfway to school," she spoke. "What if he's hungry today?" Her father kept his eyes on the road. "He might be. And if I don't help him, then I will." She frowned. "How?" "I'm working on that," he said. "But it takes time." She considered this. Hunger doesn't wait. He nodded. "You're right." They pulled into the drop-off lane. Annie unbuckled, hesitated, then leaned across the console and hugged him, tight and sudden. "Okay," she said. He closed his eyes briefly, returning the hug. "Okay." She walked into the building without looking back. He did not leave. Instead, he drove to a nearby cafe and sat with a notebook he hadn't used since Annie was a baby. He didn't write numbers. He wrote names as he remembered them from the cafeteria. Descriptions, patterns, times. He wrote down what he had seen and what he hadn't. Mostly, he wrote down questions. At noon, he returned to the school. This time, he sat where he could see everything. Annie entered the cafeteria with her tray and went to the table. The boy arrived shortly after. He looked thinner today, tired. His eyes searched Annie's face immediately. She didn't slide her tray forward. The boy waited. Annie folded her hands. She met his eyes and shook her head. Just once, a silent apology. He stiffened. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm fine." She knew he was lying. He reached into his jacket anyway. The plastic bag crinkled softly. The billionaire felt his chest tighten. Annie leaned in. She whispered something. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw the way her shoulders tensed, the way she fought the instinct to move her tray. The boy shook his head, more firmly now. He pushed his own tray closer to himself, shielding it with his arm. Annie nodded. She didn't argue. She sat through lunch without eating. But this time, she wasn't alone. Her father watched every second. After lunch, he He didn't retreat to the hallway. He walked toward the office. The receptionist looked up, smiling automatically. "Can I help you?" "Yes," he said calmly. "I'd like to speak with someone about the lunch program. Do you have an appointment?" "No." She hesitated. "I can see if the assistant principal is available." "That would be fine." He waited. The walls were covered in student artwork, crayon drawings of houses with smiling suns, messages about kindness written in careful block letters. "Be nice. Share. Everyone belongs." The assistant principal emerged a few minutes later. She looked tired, distracted. "How can I help you?" she asked. He chose his words carefully. "I've been observing lunch periods. I've noticed some children aren't eating." She blinked. "We serve all students equally." "I didn't say you didn't." She shifted her weight. "If there's a concern, parents usually bring it to us directly." "I am," he said. She glanced at her watch. "We don't have reports of food insecurity here. That's because children don't report hunger," he replied. "They adapt to it." Her expression tightened. "Are you suggesting misconduct?" "I'm suggesting invisibility." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. "We follow district guidelines," she said. "If you have specific evidence." "I'm not here to accuse," he said. "I'm here to understand." She studied him for a moment. "What's your child's name?" "Annie." Her face softened slightly. "She's a good student." "Quiet." "Yes," he said. "She's learned to be." "I canna there." The meeting ended without resolution. Polite, circular, he left knowing one thing. No one would fix what they didn't acknowledge. That afternoon, Annie didn't take anything home in her backpack. She walked slower than usual, eyes down. When she got in the car, she didn't speak. Her father waited until they were halfway home. "How was lunch?" She shrugged. "Fine. Did you eat?" She hesitated. "Not really." He nodded. "Thank you for telling me." She glanced at him. "Are you mad?" "No." "Are you going to make him eat alone?" He shook his head. "No one eats alone if I can help it." That night, Annie ate 2 full plates. She ate slower than before. When she reached for a third roll, she stopped herself, then looked at him. "Can I?" "Yes," he said. "You don't have to ask." She smiled, small and tired. After she went to bed, he made another call. This time, it was to a community coordinator he had funded years ago and never met. He asked careful questions. About families. About gaps. About grandmothers raising grandchildren. By the time he hung up, he had a list. Not of problems, of people. In her room, Annie slept with her hands open, no food hidden beneath the pillow. For the first time in weeks, her breathing was even. Her father stood in the doorway, watching. Tomorrow, the boy would still be hungry. But tomorrow, he wouldn't be invisible. Tuesday morning arrived colder than the day before. Annie noticed it immediately, the way the air bit at her fingers as she zipped her jacket, the way her breath fogged the car window. Cold mornings made hunger louder. They made everything louder. Her father handed her a scarf before she reached for the door. "Wear this." She wrapped it around her neck obediently. Okay, they drove in silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that carried weight. Annie felt it anyway. At school, she walked more slowly than usual. The boy was already there when lunch came, sitting at their table with his shoulders hunched. His jacket looked thinner today. The plastic bag was still there, folded small. Annie sat down and placed her tray in front of her. She looked at him. He looked back. Neither moved. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "I know. You promised. I know." He studied her face. "Are you hungry?" She nodded. He swallowed hard. "Then eat. We talked to Sens." She picked up her fork. Her hand shook. For a moment, Annie thought she might cry. Not because she was sad, but because choosing herself felt strange, almost wrong. Like breaking a rule she didn't remember agreeing to. She took a bite. Across the cafeteria, her father watched her shoulders relax just a fraction. It was a small thing, a forkful of food, but it felt like a turning point. The boy watched her eat for a moment, then looked down at his tray. He didn't touch it. "Did your grandma eat last night?" Annie asked. He nodded. "Someone left groceries at our door." Annie's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yeah. No note. Just bags." She glanced instinctively toward the room. searching for her father even though she couldn't see him from here. Her chest filled with something warm and confusing. "That's good," she said. "Yeah." He hesitated. "Was that you?" She shook her head quickly. "No," but she smiled. That afternoon, Annie came home with color in her cheeks. Her father noticed immediately. "You seem lighter," he said as she kicked off her shoes. "I ate lunch," she replied. He nodded. "Good." She followed him into the kitchen, watching as he pulled out ingredients and began to cook. She leaned against the counter, quiet but present. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yes? Did you leave the groceries?" He paused, knife hovering over the cutting board. "I asked someone to help." "I go." She thought about that. "For how long?" "As long as it's needed." She smiled, satisfied. That night, Annie slept deeply. Her father did not. He sat in his office, reviewing the notes he had gathered over the past week. Names, patterns, quiet observations. He added new ones now. Child adapts faster than system. Hunger hides. Silence protects nothing. He closed the notebook and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about how to solve a problem efficiently. He was thinking about how to solve it without breaking the people caught inside it. Wednesday brought rain. Annie's shoes soaked through by lunchtime, and the cafeteria felt darker, louder. The boy arrived late, hair damp, eyes tired. Annie ate half her lunch and pushed the rest of her apple toward him. "Just the apple," she said quickly, before he could refuse. "I don't like apples when they're cold." "Do I?" He hesitated. "Your dad said." "I know," she said. "This is different." He smiled faintly and took it. Across the room, her father stiffened, then relaxed. This wasn't the same. This wasn't sacrifice. This was sharing. After school, the billionaire met with the community coordinator in person for the first time. She was older, her voice steady, her eyes sharp. "You'd be surprised how many families are one missed paycheck away from hunger," she said. "I'm not surprised anymore," he replied. She nodded. "Most people don't see it until it's personal. It shouldn't have to be." "No," she agreed. "But it usually is." By Thursday, a pattern had emerged. Groceries appeared quietly. No announcements, no charity banners. Teachers received discreet guidance. The lunch staff received reminders about watching plates, not just trays. No one took credit. Annie noticed changes before adults acknowledged them. The boy smiled more. Another girl joined their table. Someone left a carton of milk untouched on purpose, and someone else picked it up without shame. At dinner that night, Annie ate slowly. She talked about her day, about reading time, about a drawing she'd made. Her father listened, really listened, and felt something loosen in his chest. "You know," she said suddenly, "you were right." "About what?" "I don't have to do it all myself." He smiled. "No, you don't." She looked down at her plate. "But I'm still glad I did something." "So am I." That night, as he turned off the light in her room, she spoke again. "Daddy?" "Yes." "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise you won't stop watching." He understood what she meant. "I promise," he said. In the darkness, Annie drifted to sleep, knowing she wasn't alone in her care anymore. And downstairs, her father opened his notebook once more and wrote a final line for the week. Quiet justice begins where someone decides to see. By the following Monday, the cafeteria felt different. Not quieter, not kinder in any obvious way, just altered. As if an invisible hand had adjusted something no one could quite name. Children still lined up. Trays still slid along metal rails, but fewer were returned untouched. Fewer eyes stayed fixed on the table while others ate. Annie sensed it the moment she stepped inside. She paused near the entrance, scanning the room the way she had learned to do when she needed to understand something quickly. The boy was there already, sitting straighter than usual. Another child sat beside him, a girl Annie had seen before but never spoken to. They were sharing a carton of milk, passing it back and forth without ceremony. Annie felt her shoulders loosen. She took her tray and joined them. "Your grandma?" she asked softly. The boy nodded. "She's better. Someone helped her get a job at the library. Just part-time." "That's good," Annie said. "It is." They ate together. Annie finished her food. All of it. The apple too. Across the room, her father watched, careful to remain unseen. He had learned where to stand, so he could see without being noticed. He had learned, too, how quickly children adapted when the pressure eased. But he also saw what hadn't changed. There were still kids who lingered, still kids who ate too fast, still kids who learned early how to disappear in plain sight. That afternoon, he met with the community coordinator again. This time, they walked. The neighborhood near the school was older, quieter. Small houses, tired porches, cars that had seen better years. These places, she said, gesturing around them, they don't fall apart all at once. They thin out. People stop asking for help because they think they don't deserve it. He nodded. And children learn that faster than anyone. With friend, she stopped walking and looked at him. You can't fix all of it, I know, but you can decide what you won't ignore. That evening, Annie came home carrying a folded piece of paper. I made something, she said, handing it to him. It was a drawing. Crayon figures around a table. Too many arms, too many smiles. One figure had dark skin, one had light. One had hair colored purple for no reason Annie could explain. Above them, she had written carefully, "Everyone eats." He swallowed. This is beautiful. She nodded, satisfied. We put it on the wall at school. Who's we? She smiled. A lot of people. That night, he received an email from the assistant principal. Brief, polite, measured. We've noticed improved participation during lunch. Thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention. He stared at the message for a long moment. Improved participation. Not hunger, not children, not need. He closed the laptop without replying. Tuesday brought another small test. Annie came home quieter than the day before. She ate dinner, but slower. She pushed her plate away before it was finished. You don't like it? Her father asked. She shook her head. I do. Then what is it? She hesitated. There's a new kid. He waited. He sits alone. His chest tightened. Did you talk to him? He doesn't talk much. What did he eat? She looked down. Not a lot. Her father stood and cleared the dishes without speaking. When he returned, he sat beside her. You don't have to fix it tonight, he said. I know, she replied. But I want to help. He considered that. Then we'll help together. The next day, he arranged for something simple. Nothing public, nothing labeled. A small adjustment in the lunch distribution. Extra fruit baskets placed where children could take without asking. Teachers encouraged, not instructed to watch who needed a second look. Annie noticed immediately. Why are there more apples? She asked. Because apples don't judge, he said. She laughed. A real laugh. The kind he hadn't heard in weeks. By Thursday, the new boy was sitting closer to their table. Annie didn't offer her tray. She offered conversation. What's your name? She asked. He shrugged. Evan. I'm Annie. I know. She smiled. Her father watched from the doorway, heart heavy and light all at once. He had underestimated how much children could teach when given just a little room. That night, after Annie went to bed, he sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet, but not empty. It felt lived in now, marked by small hands and softer routines. He thought about the deals he had made, the risks he had taken, the way he had always believed control was the same as safety. He knew better now. Safety was attention. Friday came with rain again. Annie wore the scarf he'd given her and ran ahead into the building without looking back. That no longer scared him. At lunch, he stayed away. He trusted what he had helped set in motion. In the afternoon, Annie came home, flushed and talkative. She kicked off her shoes and ran into the kitchen. Daddy, we're doing something next week. What kind of something? A food drive, she said. But not like a big one. Just a quiet one. He smiled. Quiet, how? She thought. Like you. Thanks for watching. He laughed softly. Later, as he tucked her in, she asked, Do you think it will last? What? The good part? He brushed her hair back gently. Only if people keep noticing. She yawned. You will. Yes, he said. I will. As he turned off the light, he realized something that settled deep and certain inside him. This wasn't a problem to solve. It was a responsibility to keep. And for the first time, that didn't feel heavy. It felt right. The food drive began without an announcement. There were no flyers sent home, no assemblies, no smiling photos for the school website. It started the way most lasting things did, quietly, almost by accident. On Monday morning, a cardboard box appeared near the library. Someone had written on it in marker, "Extra food, take what you need." Beneath it, in smaller letters, "Leave what you can." Annie noticed it on her way to class. She stopped, read the words twice, then touched the edge of the box as if to make sure it was real. Inside were cans, granola bars, small bags of rice, apples, nothing fancy, nothing that announced generosity. Just food. At lunch, she told the boy, "They put a box near the library," she said. "Did you see it?" He nodded. "My grandma did." Annie smiled. "Good." They ate together. No negotiations, no hesitation. Annie finished her tray, then leaned back, listening as the boy talked about a book his grandmother had borrowed from the library, something about trains and old cities. Annie didn't know much about either, but she listened anyway. Across the cafeteria, her father stood near the door, pretending to check his phone. He hadn't planned the food drive himself. Not directly. He had asked a few careful questions, made a few quiet connections, then stepped back. He was learning when to move and when to let others fill the space. By Wednesday, the box was fuller. A teacher had added peanut butter. A custodian had left a bag of oranges. A parent dropped off bread without saying a word. The box became part of the building, as unremarkable as a water fountain. But it changed things. Children who had once hidden food now lingered openly near the box. Some took, some left. Some did both, uncertain of the rules. No one stopped them. Annie watched all of it. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table doing homework while her father reviewed emails nearby. She looked up suddenly. "Do you think people know it was you?" she asked. He didn't look up. "I don't think so." "Is that okay?" "Yes," he said. "It's better that way." She considered this. Why? Because when people think help belongs to everyone, they protect it. She nodded, accepting this like a truth she'd already felt but hadn't named. On Thursday, something unexpected happened. The assistant principal asked to see him. The meeting was brief and careful, compliments wrapped around concerns. "We've noticed positive changes," she said. "But we also have to be mindful of policy." He smiled politely. "Of course, we can't officially endorse informal programs." "I understand." She hesitated. "Still, whatever's happening, it's helping." He nodded. "Then let it keep happening." She didn't argue. That afternoon, Annie came home with a new energy. "We're making signs," she announced, dropping her backpack. "Not big ones, just little ones." "What do they say?" She grinned. "Everyone eats." He felt something tighten behind his eyes. "That's a good sign." "We're putting them near the box," she continued, "so people know it's okay." That night, as she colored at the table, he watched her hands move, careful, deliberate. She was still the same child who had slid her tray across a table without hesitation. The difference was that now she wasn't alone in it. On Friday, the boy brought news. "My grandma wants to meet you," he told Annie. She blinked. "Me?" He nodded. "She says you helped us." Annie frowned. "I just shared." She says sharing is help. Annie thought about that all afternoon. At home, she told her father. "His grandma wants to meet me." He smiled. "Do you want to?" "Yes," she said, then hesitated. "But I don't want her to think I'm special." "You're special to me," he said. "But you don't need to be special to help someone." She nodded. "Okay." Saturday afternoon, they drove to a small apartment building not far from the school. The hallway smelled faintly of soup and cleaning solution. The woman who opened the door was thin, gray-haired, her eyes sharp but kind. "You must be Annie," she said. Annie nodded, suddenly shy. The woman took her hand gently. "Thank you," she said, "for thinking of us." Annie shook her head. "I didn't want him to be hungry." The woman smiled. "That's the best reason there is." They sat at a small table. Tea was poured. Cookies were shared. Nothing dramatic. Just two generations connected by a child who had refused to look away. Annie's father stayed quiet, watching. He noticed the way the woman insisted Annie take the first cookie, the way she spoke about dignity without using the word. When they left, Annie held his hand tightly. "She's nice," Annie said. "Yes," he replied. "She is." Sunday evening, Annie sat on her bed packing her backpack for Monday. She paused, then looked up at him. "I don't need to take food anymore," she said. He nodded. "I know, but I might still share," she added. "That's okay," he said. As long as you're not hurting yourself. She smiled. I won't. Idea. That night, after she fell asleep, he opened his notebook again. He wrote less now. Fewer observations, more reflections. Children will fill gaps. Adults pretend don't exist. Systems don't change because they are told to. They change when enough people quietly refuse to accept the harm they normalize. He closed the notebook and looked around the house. It felt different than it had weeks ago. Softer. More honest. On Monday morning, Annie walked into school without hesitation. She passed the box near the library and smiled when she saw it full. At lunch, she sat with her friends. She ate, she laughed, she listened. Across the room, her father watched once more, not to catch something wrong, but to make sure what was right stayed visible. By the second week of the quiet food drive, something else began to surface. It wasn't hunger, it was resentment. Annie felt it first in the way some children looked at the box near the library, not with relief, but with suspicion. A few whispered. A few laughed too loudly when someone took something. A boy she didn't know muttered, "Why don't their parents just feed them?" As he walked past, Annie didn't respond. She had learned that not every wrong thing needed a reply. Some things needed time. At lunch, she noticed the boy stiffen when another student pointed at the apple he was eating. "Is that from the box?" the student asked. "Yes," he said quietly. The other boy snorted. "Figures." Annie's fork paused midair. Her chest tightened. She leaned forward. "It's for everyone," she said. The boy shrugged. "Doesn't mean everyone should need it." The words hung there, ugly and casual. Across the cafeteria, her father saw the exchange. He didn't hear the words, but he recognized the posture. He had seen it in boardrooms too. The moment when comfort judged need. That afternoon, he met with the community coordinator again. This time, she didn't smile. "Whenever you fix one problem," she said, "another shows up." He nodded. "I know. Some parents are complaining," she continued. "They say the box encourages dependency." He let out a slow breath. "Children aren't dependent because of food," he said. "They're dependent because they're hungry." She looked at him carefully. "You'll get pushback." "I already am." That evening, Annie came home quieter. She ate dinner, but she didn't talk much. When her father asked about her day, she shrugged. "Something happened," he said. Not a question. She hesitated. "People don't like the box." "Why?" "They think it's not fair." He leaned back in his chair. "And what do you think?" She stared at her plate. "I think it's not fair when people are hungry." He nodded. "That's a good answer. But what if they make it go away?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Then we'll decide what to do next." She frowned. "Together?" "Yes," he said. "Together." That night, he sent 3 emails. Not demands, not threats, invitations. One to the assistant principal, one to the school counselor, one to a parent he knew had influence and a reputation for listening. He didn't mention money. He didn't mention names. He mentioned children. The meeting happened 2 days later in a small conference room with mismatched chairs. The tone was polite but tense. "We support helping students," one parent said, "but we don't want to send the wrong message." "What message is that?" the billionaire asked calmly. "That some kids deserve more than others." He shook his head. "That's not the message." "Then what is?" "That everyone deserves enough," he replied. "And sometimes enough comes from different places." With 30, the room fell quiet. The counselor spoke next. "Hunger affects learning," she said. "We see it every day." The assistant principal sighed. "We're trying to balance things." "With respect," he said. "Balance is a luxury hungry children don't have." No one argued with that. The compromise, when it came, was careful. The box would stay, but it would be reframed. Part of a broader wellness initiative. Language adjusted. Posters changed. Less emphasis on need, more on community. Annie wouldn't have cared about the wording, but she cared that the box stayed. On Friday, she noticed new signs near it. "Take what you need. Give when you can." She smiled. At lunch, the boys sat beside her, quieter than usual. "They almost took it away," he said. "But they didn't," Annie replied. He nodded. "Thanks to your dad." Annie frowned. "He didn't do it alone." The boy considered that. Still, that afternoon, Annie's father picked her up early. "We're going somewhere," he said. "Where?" You'll see. They drove across town to a community center that smelled like coffee and old books. Inside, volunteers were setting up tables. Boxes of food lined the walls. Annie's eyes widened. Is this for school? It's for families, he said. Some of them go to your school. She looked at him. Can I help? That's why we're here. Well, later. She spent the next hour handing out bags, smiling shyly at strangers, listening as adults thanked her like she was much older than she was. Her father watched from a distance, pride and unease mixing in equal measure. On the way home, she leaned her head against the window. You look tired, he said. I am, she replied. But it's a good tired. He smiled. That's how you know it matters. That night, as he tucked her in, she asked, do you think it will always be like this? Like what? Like people arguing about who deserves help. He thought for a moment. Yes, he said honestly. I do, she nodded, absorbing that. Then we have to keep paying attention. Yes, he said. We do. After she fell asleep, he stood in the doorway longer than usual. He thought about the meeting, the resistance, the careful compromises. He had once believed that progress came from force. Now he understood something quieter and more dangerous. Progress came from persistence, from staying, from refusing to be embarrassed by compassion. The next week would bring new challenges. He knew that. But for now, the box was still there. Children were still eating, and his daughter was learning that doing the right thing didn't mean everyone would like you. It meant you were doing it anyway. The backlash didn't arrive loudly. It came in pieces. An email sent late at night. A comment made too casually to challenge. A smile that didn't reach the eyes. Annie felt it before her father did. On Monday morning, she noticed fewer kids near the box by the library. Not because it was empty, it wasn't, but because some children now walked past it with exaggerated indifference, as if looking would mean admitting something about themselves. At lunch, the table felt smaller. The boy was there. The girl too. But Evan, the new kid, sat 2 tables away, his tray half full, his eyes darting around the room. Annie watched him push peas into a neat pile, then stop eating altogether. You're not hungry? She asked quietly. He shrugged. I am. Then why? He leaned closer. Someone said it's embarrassing. Annie's stomach tightened. Who? He shook his head. Doesn't matter. It did matter. But Annie was learning that forcing answers sometimes made people retreat further. She finished her lunch and stood. She didn't take her tray to the return window right away. Instead, she walked past Evan's table and sat down across from him. You can sit with us, she said. He hesitated. I don't want trouble. You won't, she said. I promise. He searched her face. Annie held his gaze, steady and unflinching. Finally, he picked up his tray and followed her. Across the cafeteria, her father noticed the shift immediately. Not just Evan moving tables, but the looks that followed him. Curious, judging, unkind in small, practiced ways. He felt anger rise, sharp and immediate. He forced it down. Anger made noise. Noise invited defenses. He needed clarity. That afternoon, Annie came home quieter than usual. They were mean, she said finally, when he asked about her day. Who? Some kids. She picked at a thread on the couch cushion. They said people who take food are lazy. His jaw tightened. What did you say? She looked up at him. I said, hungry isn't lazy. He nodded slowly. That was the right thing to say. But they laughed, she added, like it was funny. He sat beside her. People laugh when they don't want to think. Why? Because thinking means changing, he said. And changing scares them. She considered that. I don't like it. I don't either, he said. But I'm proud of you. Everyone. That night, he made another round of calls. Not to administrators this time. To parents. Not all of them. Just a few he knew could listen without reacting defensively. He spoke plainly. No accusations. No demands. I don't want the box to disappear. One mother said quietly. My sister needed something like that when we were kids. Another parent sighed. I didn't realize how bad it was for some families. He nodded, even when they couldn't see him. Realization was the beginning, not the end. On Wednesday, the assistant principal called him into her office. We've received concerns, she said carefully, about social dynamics. He folded his hands. Children are learning who they're allowed to be. She frowned. That's not our intention. I know, he said. But intention doesn't stop impact. She sighed. What are you suggesting? He leaned forward slightly. Conversation. Not punishment. Not removal. Just honesty. She hesitated. Parents won't like it. Here. And refreshed. Some won't, he agreed. But children need it. The following Friday, the school held a small assembly. No announcements beforehand. No big stage. Just students sitting on the floor while the counselor spoke about kindness, dignity, and the difference between fairness and sameness. Annie listened, legs crossed, hands in her lap. When someone has less, the counselor said, helping them doesn't mean you lose something. It means we all keep our humanity. Annie glanced around. Some kids looked bored. Some looked uncomfortable. A few looked relieved. That was enough. At lunch afterward, Evans sat at the table without hesitation. No one laughed. No one commented. It wasn't perfect, but it was quieter. That evening, Annie and her father walked around the neighborhood after dinner. Leaves crunched under their feet. The sky was low and gray. Daddy? Annie asked. Yes? Why do people get mad when you help? He thought about that. About boardrooms, about shareholders, about scarcity framed as morality. Because help reminds them of something they don't want to face, he said. That none of us are as independent as we pretend. She nodded slowly. I don't pretend. He smiled. I know. They walked in silence for a while. I'm glad you didn't stop, she said. Stop what? Watching. He looked down at her. So am I. That night, after Annie fell asleep, he sat at his desk again. He didn't open the notebook right away. He stared at the wall, at the quiet evidence of a life rearranged drawings taped to the fridge, shoes by the door, the soft disorder that came from caring. When he finally wrote, it was only one sentence. Compassion doesn't fail because it's wrong. It fails when it's left alone. He closed the notebook. Tomorrow would bring more tests, more resistance, more quiet courage. And he would meet them the same way Annie had taught him to. By staying, by listening, by refusing to look away. The first note arrived on a Thursday. It was folded once, slipped into Annie's backpack between a math worksheet and a crayon drawing. She found it that afternoon while unpacking at the kitchen table. At first, she thought it was something she'd forgotten until she saw the handwriting. Neat, adult, careful. She didn't open it right away. She slid it back into the folder and watched her father as he cooked, the familiar rhythm of his movements steadying her. When he finally sat across from her with a plate, she pushed the backpack toward him. There's something in there, she said. He looked up. Homework? She shook her head. A note. He paused, then reached inside and unfolded it. We are concerned about the influence your daughter is having on other students. While kindness is important, it is equally important that children learn personal responsibility and boundaries. He read it twice. Then a third time. Annie watched his face closely. She knew the difference between his thinking face and his anger face. This was neither. This was something tighter. Am I in trouble? She asked. No, he said immediately. Did I do something wrong? He set the note down. You did something uncomfortable. She frowned. That's bad? No, he said. It's necessary. She studied the paper. Who wrote it? A parent, he replied. Maybe more than one. She considered that. They don't know me. He smiled faintly. No, they know an idea of you. What idea? He thought for a moment. A child who reminds them of something they don't want to think about. Annie picked at her sleeve. Should I stop? The question landed heavier than he expected. No, he said gently. You should never stop being who you are. She nodded, but her eyes clouded. But I don't want to make things worse. He leaned forward. Listen to me. Making things visible can feel like making them worse. That doesn't mean it is. She absorbed this quietly. That night, he drafted a response to the note and deleted it. Drafted another and deleted that too. Each version felt like it said too much or not enough. Finally, he wrote one sentence. My daughter is learning empathy. I support that. He sent it and closed the laptop. The next day, the box near the library was gone. Annie noticed immediately. She stopped short, scanning the space where it had been. The floor looked too clean, too empty. Did they move it? She asked a teacher passing by. The teacher hesitated. It's being reassessed. Annie didn't know what reassessed meant, but she knew what gone felt like. At lunch, the table was quieter. The boy picked at his food. Evan barely touched his tray. Annie ate slowly, her appetite shrinking with every glance toward the hallway. That afternoon, she didn't talk much. Her father noticed. "The box is gone," she said finally. "Yes," he replied. "I know. Meng. Is it because of me?" "No," he said firmly. "It's because some adults are afraid of conversations they don't control." She kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. "So what happens now?" He stopped walking and knelt in front of her. "Now we decide how to keep going." "How?" "By being very clear about what matters," he said. On Monday morning, the assistant principal called him again. This time, there was no small talk. "We received complaints," she said, "about pressure on other students, about creating divisions." "Division already exists," he replied calmly. "Ignoring it doesn't remove it. We can't have informal distribution of food," she said. "It opens us up to liability." He nodded. "Then formalize it." She blinked. "That's not simple." "No," he agreed, "but it's necessary." Silence stretched between them. "We'll consider options," she said finally. "That's all I'm asking," he replied. At home that evening, Annie sat at the table drawing circles on a piece of paper. She looked up suddenly. "Daddy?" "Yes?" "If they don't bring the box back, can we still help?" He smiled. "Yes." "How?" "By making sure help doesn't depend on permission," he said. She nodded slowly. "Like the groceries." "Exactly." That night, he made more calls. Not reactive ones, strategic ones. To local nonprofits, to the district's wellness coordinator, to a retired principal he trusted. By Wednesday, a proposal was drafted. By Friday, it was accepted. The box returned the following Monday, but it wasn't a box anymore. It was a shelf. Permanent. Labeled. Stocked through a partnership with a local food bank. Overseen by staff. Accessible without explanation. The sign above it read simply, "Community Shelf." Annie stood in front of it, stunned. "It's back," she whispered. Her father stood a few steps behind her. "Yes," he said. "And it's not fragile anymore." Now, at lunch, the shelf was used quietly, naturally, without whispers. Evan took a granola bar and didn't hide it. The boy took an apple and smiled. Annie ate her lunch and felt something settle in her chest. That afternoon, she came home carrying another piece of paper. "This one's from my teacher," she said. He read it. "Annie showed leadership and compassion today. Thank you for encouraging those values at home." He looked at her. "How does that feel?" She smiled, small but real. "Better." That night, as he tucked her in, she asked, "Will people always push back?" "Yes," he said honestly. "Even when you're right?" "Especially then." She yawned. "Okay." He kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep." As he turned off the light, he thought about the note from last week. The fear behind it. The need to control. He understood it better now. Control felt safer than care, but real care lasted longer. Down the hall, Annie slept deeply, her hands empty, her stomach full, and in the quiet of the house, her father allowed himself a small, steady hope. Not that things would stay easy, but that they would keep moving forward, one careful decision at a time. The shelf changed the rhythm of the school, not overnight, not dramatically, but in the way tides change, shorelines slow, persistent, reshaping what had once seemed fixed. Annie noticed it in small ways. The way kids no longer hovered before taking food. The way teachers stopped pretending not to see. The way lunchtime conversations drifted back toward homework and weekend plans instead of whispers and glances. But change, she was learning, never moved in only one direction. On Wednesday, a substitute teacher filled in for the afternoon. She was older, brisk, her smile tight. During quiet reading time, Annie saw her pause near the community shelf, eyes narrowing just slightly. "What's this?" the woman asked aloud. "A shelf," a student answered. "For what?" "Food." The teacher pursed her lips. "During class, it's always there," Annie said carefully. The teacher nodded once. "I see." She moved on, but the room felt different afterward, stiffer, as if something fragile had been touched without permission. That afternoon, Annie found her father in his office, standing by the window. Phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly. "I understand the concern." A pause. "No, I don't think removing access teaches responsibility." Another pause. "Because hunger isn't a lesson." He hung up and turned to Annie. "Everything okay?" she asked. "For now," he said. She climbed onto the chair across from his desk. "People still don't like it." I arched. "No," he agreed. "Some never will." "Why?" He considered the question. "Because it reminds them that the world isn't fair, and that fairness sometimes asks something of them." She nodded, absorbing it the way she absorbed most things lately, silently, deeply. On Friday, the school newsletter went out. The community shelf was mentioned briefly, folded into a paragraph about student wellness initiatives. The language was careful, neutral, safe. Annie read it twice. They didn't say why it matters. Her father smiled faintly. "They said it exists." "That's enough? For now," he said. That weekend, they visited the community center again. This time, Annie recognized faces. Parents who nodded at her. Kids who waved. The boy's grandmother was there too, sitting at a folding table, sorting canned goods with deliberate care. "You've been busy," she said to Annie. Annie shrugged. "So have you." The woman laughed softly. "That's true. I go." As they left, Annie tugged on her father's sleeve. "Do you think the shelf would still be there if you weren't?" "You?" He knew what she meant. "Do you want the honest answer?" he asked. She nodded. "No," he said. "Not yet." She frowned. "That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "But it's real." She walked quietly for a few steps. "Then what happens when you're not around?" He stopped, knelt, met her eyes. "Then we make sure it doesn't depend on me." "How?" "By making it normal," he said. "So normal no one remembers who started it." She smiled at that. "Like sharing lunch." "Exactly." Monday brought another test. A parent meeting. Closed door. Careful language. A few raised voices. Annie stayed in class while her father sat at a long table across from people who spoke about values and optics and precedent. He listened more than he talked. When he did speak, it was measured. "You're worried about setting expectations," he said. "I'm worried about setting examples." Someone sighed. "We can't fix everything." "I'm not asking you to," he replied. "I'm asking you not to undo what's helping." The meeting ended without resolution, but also without retreat. That afternoon, Annie waited by the window until she saw his car pull up. "Did they take it away?" she asked as soon as he walked in. "No," he said. She exhaled. "But they might try something else." She nodded. "They always do." "Node." He smiled. "You're getting good at this." "I was novice." "I don't want to be," she said quietly. He crouched beside her. "I know." That night, Annie dreamed of long tables and empty plates. She woke once, disoriented, then fell back asleep, clutching her blanket. Her father sat at his desk, staring at a document on his screen he hadn't opened yet. It was a draft, a proposal, bigger than the school, bigger than the shelf. He hadn't planned to use it. Now, he wasn't sure he had a choice. Tuesday morning, Annie noticed a new sign near the community shelf. "Please take responsibly." Her chest tightened. "What does that mean?" she asked her teacher. The teacher hesitated. "It means, be mindful." "Of what?" The teacher smiled thinly. "Of others." Annie stared at the sign during lunch. Be mindful. She thought of the boy's careful hands, Evan's lowered eyes, the way hunger already made children mindful of everything. That afternoon, she didn't say much. At home, she sat beside her father on the couch. "I don't like the new sign." "I know," he said. "It feels like a warning." "Yes," he said quietly. "It does." She leaned against him. "What are you going to do?" He closed his eyes for a moment. "I'm going to make sure no one confuses caution with shame." The next day, the sign was gone. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. Annie smiled when she saw the empty space where it had been. At lunch, the shelf was used as before. No hesitation, no glances. That evening, her father received an email marked urgent. He read it once, Then again, Annie watched his face. Is it bad? No, he said slowly. It's bigger. What does that mean? It means what we started here is being noticed. She considered that. Is that good? He smiled. It depends what we do next. She thought for a moment. We keep going. He nodded. Yes. Outside, the evening settled into quiet. Inside, something shifted again, not backward this time, but forward, into territory that no longer belonged to just one school, or one shelf, or one child. Annie sat with her father, feet tucked beneath her, unaware of how far her small, stubborn kindness had already traveled. And her father understood something with sudden clarity. The hardest part was no longer protecting the change. It was deciding how much of the world he was willing to let it touch. The attention arrived the way storms often did after a stretch of uneasy calm. It began with a phone call her father didn't take in front of Annie. He stepped into the hallway, lowered his voice, and listened longer than he spoke. When he returned, his expression had changed, not alarmed, focused. Is it about the shelf? Annie asked. Yes, he said, and about more than the shelf. She sat cross-legged on the couch, waiting. There are people who want to know how it happened, he continued. Not just here. Other schools, other districts. Her brow furrowed. Why? Because what works quietly in one place can work in others, he said. And because some people are uncomfortable when they can't control who gets help. She nodded. They don't like not being in charge. No, he agreed. They don't. The next morning, the school felt tighter. Annie sensed it the moment she walked in. Adults stood in small clusters, speaking in careful tones. A clipboard appeared near the office. Someone new, an administrator she didn't recognize, stood near the hallway, watching the flow of students with polite intensity. At lunch, the community shelf remained untouched for the first 10 minutes. Annie watched children glance at it, then look away. She felt the old knot in her stomach begin to form. Then the boy stood up. He walked to the shelf without looking around, took an apple and a granola bar, and returned to the table. He sat down and unwrapped the bar slowly, deliberately. The knot loosened. One by one, others followed. Across the room, the unfamiliar administrator scribbled something on the clipboard. That afternoon, Annie's teacher asked her to stay behind for a moment after class. You've been very thoughtful lately, the teacher said, smiling gently. But some changes are happening. You might hear adults talking. Am I in trouble? Annie asked. No, the teacher said quickly. Not at all. Annie nodded. But she had learned by now that reassurance often arrived before difficulty. At home, her father was already waiting. They want to formalize it, he said as she dropped her backpack. The shelf? Yes, and more. She sat down slowly. Is that bad? It depends, he said. Formal things can last, but they can also lose their heart. She frowned. Can they make rules that stop people from using it? They can try, he said honestly. She stared at the floor. Then why do it? Because if we don't help shape it, he replied, someone else will. That night, he showed her a simple document. No logos, no names, just ideas, local partnerships, quiet funding, clear language that protected dignity instead of policing need. Annie traced the words with her finger. It says access without explanation. Yes, I like that, she said. Nobody should have to explain being hungry. He smiled. That sentence came from you. She blinked. It did? You said it without knowing, he replied. 2 days later, a small meeting took place at the school. No press, no parents, just administrators, a counselor, and Annie's father. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't bring lawyers. He brought stories. He talked about patterns, about what children do when adults aren't watching, about how shame teaches faster than rules and how it lasts longer. Food is not a reward, he said calmly. It's not an incentive. It's a baseline. One administrator shifted uncomfortably. We have to think about fairness. Fairness isn't sameness, he replied. It's making sure no one starts from empty. Silence followed. When the meeting ended, nothing was signed. Nothing was promised. But nothing was shut down. That afternoon, Annie noticed something new. A second shelf, smaller, appeared near the gym. She looked at her teacher. Is that another one? The teacher smiled. Yes, Annie felt a cautious warmth spread through her chest. At lunch, the shelves were used without ceremony. No announcements, no explanations, just children moving where they needed to. That night, Annie sat on her bed, swinging her legs. "Daddy?" she asked. "Are we winning?" He sat beside her. "This isn't something you win." She thought about that. "Are we losing?" "No," he said softly. "We're changing how the game is played." She nodded, satisfied with that answer. On Friday, a letter went home to parents. Carefully worded, thoughtful, framed around wellness and community partnerships. No mention of hunger, no mention of blame. Annie watched her father read it. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It's careful," he said, "which means it will survive. Is that good?" "Yes," he said. "Sometimes careful is how you protect something fragile until it's strong enough to stand on its own." Over the weekend, Annie visited the community center again. This time, a new volunteer asked her why she helped. Annie shrugged. Because it was there. The volunteer smiled, confused. "What was?" "The chance," Annie said. On Sunday night, Annie dreamed again, but this time, the tables were full. People talked, laughed. No one counted bites. Her father sat at his desk, rereading an email he hadn't answered yet. It was from someone at the district. Interested, curious, cautious. He knew what came next would be harder. Visibility always was. Because visibility invited credit, and credit invited ownership. And ownership could undo everything if it wasn't handled with care. He closed the email without replying. Tomorrow, he would answer. But tonight, he stood in Annie's doorway and watched her sleep, peaceful and unburdened. He thought of the first day he had seen her slide her tray across a table. He understood now that the hardest part wasn't stopping harm. It was protecting goodness once the world noticed it. Visibility changed the rules. By Monday morning, the community shelf was no longer something people pretended not to see. It had become a reference point. Not loud, not celebrated, but acknowledged in the careful way institutions acknowledged anything they hadn't fully decided how to control. Annie felt it in the way adults watched longer. In the way some teachers smiled too quickly. In the way a few parents lingered at drop-off, eyes scanning the hallway before leaving. She didn't like it. At lunch, she noticed the boy hesitate before standing up. His hand hovered near the table, fingers tapping once against the edge. "You okay?" Annie asked quietly. He nodded. "Just thinking." "About what? About who's watching?" Annie glanced around. The unfamiliar administrator was there again, clipboard tucked under her arm. Two teachers stood near the wall, pretending to discuss schedules. Annie leaned closer. "You don't have to stop." "I know," he said. "But it feels different." Was 9. She understood. Help felt lighter when no one kept score. Across the room, her father watched the same moment and felt a familiar tension rise. He recognized it from business negotiations the instant when something fragile risked becoming performative. That afternoon, he received another email from the district, this one less careful. They wanted to pilot the program. Formal language, metrics, oversight. He read it twice, then closed his laptop and stared at the wall. That evening, Annie sensed the shift in him immediately. "You're thinking hard," she said, as he stirred soup he'd forgotten to season. "Yes," he replied. "Is it bad thinking or good thinking?" He smiled faintly. "Necessary thinking." They ate in silence for a moment. Then Annie spoke. "Are they going to take it away?" "No," he said. "But they want to put their name on it." She frowned. "Why?" "Because people like to be seen doing good," he said, "even when they didn't start it." "Oh," she considered that. "Is that wrong?" "Not always," he said. "But it can change why people do things." She pushed her bowl away, appetite suddenly gone. "I don't want it to turn into a rule." He looked at her. "What kind of rule?" "The kind where people stop helping because they think someone else is in charge." Her words landed with quiet precision. He nodded slowly. "That's exactly the risk." The next day, he met with the district representatives. They spoke about scalability, about branding, about ensuring consistent messaging. They used words like stakeholders and accountability. He listened. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't raise his voice. "Children don't experience hunger as a program," he said. "They experience it as a feeling. If you turn this into something that feels conditional, you will lose the very thing that makes it work." One of them frowned. "We need structure." "Structure isn't control," he replied. It's protection. They went quiet. By Wednesday, the school buzzed with rumors. Someone said the shelves would be locked. Someone said they would move them to the nurse's office. Someone said kids would need permission slips. None of it was true, but the fear spread anyway. At lunch, fewer children approached the shelves. Annie felt the old knot return. She didn't speak. She didn't argue. She stood up and took an apple from the shelf, then sat back down and ate it slowly, deliberately, as if daring the room to object. No one did, but the silence felt heavier than before. That afternoon, Annie's teacher pulled her aside. You've done something important, the teacher said gently. But big changes make people nervous. Why? Annie asked. Because they don't know where they fit anymore. Annie thought about that all the way home. Daddy, she said in the car, what if they ruin it? He tightened his grip on the steering wheel for a moment. Then, we'll remember why it mattered in the first place. 25. That night, he made a decision. He wrote a response to the district. Clear, polite, unyielding. He agreed to support expansion, but only under one condition. No names, no placas, no announcements about who funded what. The shelves would exist as part of the school, not as proof of anyone's generosity. If that wasn't acceptable, he would step back entirely. He sent the email and closed the laptop. On Thursday morning, Annie noticed something new. A student she didn't know stood near the shelf, unsure. Annie didn't move toward her. She didn't speak. Another girl stepped forward instead. It's okay, the girl said. You can take one. The student nodded and reached out. Annie watched, heart pounding, as the moment passed without her. That afternoon, she ran into the house, smiling. I didn't have to do it, she said. Her father looked up. Do what? Be the one, she said. Someone else helped. He smiled, slow and real. That's how you know it's working. On Friday, the district replied. Short message. Careful wording. They agreed. No branding, no attribution. Quiet partnerships only. Annie didn't understand the email when he showed it to her, but she understood his smile. They said yes, she said. Yes, he replied. They did. That night, as he tucked her in, she asked, Is it over now? He shook his head gently. No, but it's steadier. She yawned. I like steady. So do I, he said. After she fell asleep, he stood in the doorway, thinking about how close it had come to breaking, about how easily good intentions could be reshaped into something hollow. He knew the hardest work wasn't ahead. It was ongoing. Protecting something good didn't mean guarding it forever. It meant knowing when to let it belong to everyone else. Steady didn't mean simple. By the following week, the community shelves had become part of the school's rhythm, quiet, useful, unremarkable in the way the most important things often were. Children passed them without hesitation. Teachers stopped monitoring them openly. The administrator with the clipboard appeared less often, her presence fading as the novelty wore off. Annie noticed the change in herself before she noticed it anywhere else. She wasn't counting food anymore. She wasn't scanning faces for signs of hunger the moment she entered the cafeteria. She still saw them, of course, but they didn't feel like emergencies pressing against her chest. They felt like shared responsibilities now, spread across more hands than just her own. That mattered. At lunch on Tuesday, she sat with her friends and talked about a class project involving planets. Evan argued that Saturn was the best because of the rings. The boy said Mars was more interesting because people wanted to go there. Would you go? Annie asked. Maybe, he said. If there was food. They laughed. Across the room, her father watched the laughter and felt a quiet relief settle in. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding his breath until now. That afternoon, the school counselor asked to speak with him again. This time, she smiled. I wanted you to know, she said. We're seeing fewer nurse visits around lunchtime, fewer headaches, fewer kids falling asleep in class. He nodded. That's what food does. She hesitated. Some parents are still uncomfortable. I know, he said. But others, she smiled again, others are grateful. That night, Annie helped him cook dinner. She stirred while he chopped, careful and serious. Daddy? She asked. Do you think the shelves will always be there? He considered the question. They'll be there as long as people remember why they matter. Oh, and if they forget? Then someone will remind them, he said. She smiled. Maybe not me this time, he smiled back. Maybe not. Wednesday brought a small but telling moment. A new student arrived midweek, quiet, unsure. clutching his backpack like it might disappear. At lunch, he stood frozen near the entrance, overwhelmed by the noise and movement. Annie noticed him. She didn't get up right away. She waited. Another child, one she barely knew, stood instead, walked over, pointed to an open seat. The new student followed, relief visible even from a distance. Annie watched, heart full and strangely light. She didn't feel replaced. She felt relieved. At home that evening, she told her father, "I didn't have to help today." He looked at her. How did that feel? She thought. Why? Because it means people learned. He nodded. Yes. That night, he sat at his desk again, opening the notebook he hadn't written in for days. He flipped through earlier pages, observations, questions, worries, and realized something had changed. The notes had stopped being about preventing harm. They had started being about sustaining care. He wrote one more line. The goal is not to be needed forever. The goal is to build something that doesn't need you at all. Thursday afternoon, Annie came home with a permission slip. Field trip, she announced. To the community center. He smiled. That seems fitting. 9. We're learning about helpers, she said. Not heroes, helpers. He paused. What's the difference? She shrugged. Helpers stay. On Friday, the school held a small classroom discussion. Not an assembly, not a lecture. Just a conversation. What does fairness mean? The teacher asked. Hands went up. Annie listened. Some kids talked about rules, some about sharing. One said fairness meant everyone got the same thing. Annie raised her hand last. Fairness means nobody starts with nothing, she said. The room went quiet. The teacher nodded slowly. That's an important way to think about it. That afternoon, Annie's father received a call from the district again. They wanted to expand the shelves to 2 more schools. No press, no names, just logistics. He agreed, but after the call ended, he felt something unexpected. Not pride, responsibility. That night, Annie sat on her bed, lining up stuffed animals before sleep. Daddy, she asked, what if one day I don't notice anymore? He sat beside her. Notice what? When people need help, he thought carefully. You might not always notice the same way, he said. But if you keep caring, you'll notice what matters. She nodded, satisfied. As she drifted to sleep, he stayed a moment longer, listening to her breathing. He thought back to the first day he had watched her give away her lunch tray. How helpless he had felt, how angry at himself for not seeing sooner. He understood now that the moment hadn't been a failure. It had been an invitation to pay attention, to stay, to learn from a 6-year-old who understood something most adults spent a lifetime avoiding. That caring quietly, consistently, without needing credit, was not weakness. It was the strongest thing he had ever seen. The invitation arrived in a plain envelope. No letterhead, no branding, just a typed note folded neatly inside. Community roundtable discussion. Student wellness and access. Attendance requested. Annie found it on the kitchen counter after school, sandwiched between mail and a grocery receipt. Daddy, she said, holding it up. What's this? He glanced at it and felt a familiar tightening in his chest. It's a meeting. About the shelves? Yes. She tilted her head. Are they mad again? He smiled faintly. Some people are curious, some are cautious, some are uncomfortable. She nodded. That sounds like grown-ups. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the district office. Annie didn't go, but she knew it mattered. She could feel it in the way her father grew quieter as the day approached, more deliberate in his movements, more careful with his words. On Thursday morning, the school felt tense again. Not like before, no rumors. No signs disappearing, but a low hum of anticipation. Teachers spoke in softer voices. The counselor smiled reassuringly, a little too often. At lunch, Annie sat with her friends and ate normally. She laughed at a joke Evan told and finished her milk without thinking. But she noticed the way some kids watched the shelves now, not with fear, but with curiosity, as if trying to understand who they belonged to. After school, her father picked her up early. I'll be a little late tonight, he said as they drove home. Where are you going? She asked, though she already knew. To talk, he replied, and to listen. She looked out the window. Tell them it's not about being nice. He glanced at her. What is it about? It's about not letting people be hungry when you can help, she said. That's not nice. That's normal, he smiled. I'll remember that. The district office was quieter than he expected. A long table, neutral walls, coffee gone cold in paper cups. About a dozen people, administrators, counselors, 2 board members, and 3 parents who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. No press, no cameras. That was intentional. The discussion began carefully. Concerns about precedent, about sustainability, about whether schools should be responsible for what families couldn't provide. He listened. When it was his turn, he didn't argue. He told a story about watching his daughter give away her lunch tray, about how she hadn't done it to make a point, about how hunger had taught children to be quiet long before adults noticed. Children don't game systems, he said calmly. They adapt to them. And when systems fail, they adapt again by shrinking. One board member shifted uncomfortably. He continued. The shelves didn't create need. They revealed it. And once revealed, the only question is whether we choose to respond. A parent spoke up. But where does it end? He nodded. That's the wrong question. Silence followed. The right question, he said, is where does it begin? When the meeting ended, nothing dramatic happened. No votes, no declarations, but something shifted. 2 administrators stayed behind to ask questions. Practical ones, honest ones. As he walked out into the cool evening air, he felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle again. Not heavier than before, just wider. At home, Annie was already in her pajamas, sitting cross-legged on her bed. How was it? She asked. He sat beside her. It was real, she nodded. Did you tell them? Yes. Did they listen? Some did, he said. Some are still thinking. She yawned. Thinking is good. Yes, he agreed. It is. The next morning, the school newsletter went out again. This time, the community shelves were mentioned not as an initiative, but as part of the school's values. Supporting learning means supporting the whole child. Annie read the line twice. They didn't say hunger, she said. No, her father replied. But they're getting closer. Friday brought an unexpected moment. During lunch, a teacher approached the shelves and straightened a stack of granola bars. She didn't look around, didn't announce it. She just did it. Annie watched, heart steady. That afternoon, the boy's grandmother stopped by the school. She stood near the entrance, hands clasped, unsure. Annie spotted her and ran over. You came, Annie said. The woman smiled. I wanted to see where it all started. They walked past the shelves together. This helped us, the woman said softly. But more than the food, it helped him feel like he wasn't invisible. Annie nodded. Nobody should feel that way. The woman looked at her carefully. You taught a lot of adults something. Annie shrugged. I was just hungry once. Is grated. That night, Annie slept quickly, deeply. Her father sat at his desk one last time that week, notebook open. He wrote slowly. Change doesn't announce itself. It waits to see if you'll stay when it becomes inconvenient. He closed the notebook and turned off the light. Tomorrow would be quieter, steadier, and after that, who knew? But one thing was certain now. What Annie had started no longer belonged to just her. It belonged to everyone willing to notice. The last change was the quietest one. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that rarely announced anything important. The sky was low and gray. The hall smelled faintly of cleaner and wet coats. Annie hung her jacket on the same hook she always used and walked toward her classroom without thinking about it. That was how her father knew something had truly shifted. Because she no longer walked into the building scanning for need. She walked in expecting care to already be there. At lunch, the cafeteria moved with its familiar rhythm. Trays clattered. Chairs scraped. Laughter rose and fell in waves. The community shelves stood where they always had, unremarkable now, like water fountains or pencil sharpeners. Annie sat with her friends and ate every bite of her meal. She didn't pause. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look around to see who might be watching. Across the room, her father stood near the doorway one last time. He had told himself this would be the last day he watched from a distance. Not because the world had been fixed, but because his watching had done its work. The shelves were used. The children were fed. The adults had stopped pretending not to see. Most importantly, Annie was no longer carrying what had never been meant for her shoulders alone. He watched Evan laugh at something the boy said. He watched another child walk to the shelf, take an orange, and return to her seat without comment. He watched a teacher refill a bin and keep walking. No one applauded. No one thanked anyone. That was the point. That evening, Annie came home with a folded piece of paper in her hand. "What's that?" her father asked. She handed it to him. It was a short note from her teacher. "Annie has grown this year not just academically, but in confidence. She participates more. She laughs more. Thank you for supporting her." He read it twice, then looked at Annie. "You laugh more," he said. She nodded. "I'm not worried all the time anymore." "About what?" "About people being hungry." He knelt in front of her. "Do you think that means you stopped caring?" She shook her head. "No. It means other people care too." That night, Annie lay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yes? Do you remember when I said I wouldn't be hungry because you're a billionaire?" He smiled softly. "I remember. That wasn't really true," she said. "No," he agreed. "It wasn't. I was hungry," she continued. "But I thought it didn't matter." His chest tightened. It mattered. She turned onto her side, facing him. "I know that now." He brushed her hair back gently. "So do I." On Friday, the school held a small end-of-term assembly. Nothing about the shelves, nothing about hunger. Just student artwork on the walls and a short speech about community. Annie stood with her class, hands clasped, listening. "When we talk about kindness," the principal said, "we don't mean big gestures. We mean noticing. We mean staying. We mean choosing not to look away." Annie felt her throat tighten. She glanced toward the back of the room and saw her father standing there. Arms crossed loosely, eyes steady. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't serious. He was present. After the assembly, a parent approached him, a man he had never met. "I wanted to say thank you," the man said quietly. "My daughter stopped having stomach aches after lunch." He nodded. "I'm glad." "She didn't even know why," the man continued. "She just said school feels different." Different. That was the word Annie used too. That weekend, Annie and her father walked through the park as leaves began to turn. She kicked a pile of them and laughed when they scattered. "Do you think I'll remember all this when I'm older?" she asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Even if I forget the details?" "Yes," he repeated. "You'll remember how it felt." She nodded. "I want to remember that." On Sunday evening, as she packed her backpack for Monday, she paused. "I don't need to take food anymore," she said, more to herself than to him. "I know," he replied. "But I might still notice," she added. He smiled. "I hope you always do." That night, after Annie fell asleep, he stood alone in the kitchen, the house quiet around him. He thought about the man he had been before, measuring success in growth charts and contracts, believing protection meant control. He understood now how incomplete that had been. Real protection, he had learned, came from attention, from humility, from letting a 6-year-old teach him that dignity was not something you earned, but something you defended, especially when it was easiest to ignore. The next morning, Annie walked into school without looking back. She didn't need to. The shelves stood. The children ate. The system, imperfect, fragile, human, kept moving forward. And somewhere between a lunch tray slid across a table and a quiet shelf in a hallway, something essential had changed. Not because a billionaire intervened, but because a little girl refused to believe that hunger was acceptable, and because one man chose to listen, to truly listen when she showed him what mattered. This is the end of the story, but it is not the end of the work. The lesson of this story is simple but demanding. True justice begins with noticing. Hunger, inequality, and quiet suffering do not disappear because rules exist or systems claim fairness. They persist when good people look away. Annie's small act of sharing reminds us that compassion does not require permission, wealth, or authority. It requires attention and courage. And her father's journey teaches that real responsibility is not about control or recognition, but about staying present long enough for goodness to become shared, protected, and lasting. In the end, the story asks the audience a hard question. When we see quiet injustice, do we explain it away, or do we choose to stay and act? This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.